The train's whistle screamed through the Texas heat as Eleanor Owens pressed her trembling hand against the grimy window, watching an unfamiliar platform materialize through clouds of steam and dust. Trinity Station sprawled before her like a mirage, all weathered wood and sun-bleached paint, and her heart plummeted into her stomach, because this was absolutely undeniably not Sweetwater, where her intended husband was supposed to be waiting. The conductor's voice had called out Trinity, and she had been too lost in anxious thoughts about meeting a man she had only known through letters to realize the terrible mistake until the train lurched to its final stop. Eleanor gathered her carpet bag and the small trunk that contained everything she owned in this world, her hands shaking as passengers jostled past her down the narrow aisle. She was 22 years old, traveling alone from Philadelphia, and she had spent her last dollars on this train ticket to become the bride of a merchant named Harold Pettigrew in Sweetwater. Now she stood on the wrong platform in the wrong town, and panic rose in her throat like bile. The June sun beat down mercilessly as she stepped onto the wooden platform, the heat so different from anything she had known back east. Trinity looked smaller than Sweetwater was supposed to be, a collection of buildings that seemed to huddle together against the endless expanse of Texas prairie stretching in every direction. "You look lost, miss." The voice came from her left, deep and concerned, and Eleanor turned to see a man standing near the station house wall. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar beneath a worn Stetson. His eyes were a startling blue-green, the color of the ocean on the single day her father had taken her to the shore as a child. He wore dusty work clothes and scuffed boots, and there was something solid and genuine about him that made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "I am lost," Eleanor admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was supposed to go to Sweetwater, but I fell asleep and missed my stop. The conductor said the train would not go back that way for 3 days. The man stepped closer, his expression sympathetic. "That is a problem. Sweetwater is about 40 miles west of here. You have someone waiting for you there?" Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the Texas sun. "I am a mail-order bride. My intended husband is expecting me this afternoon." Something flickered across the man's face too quickly for her to identify. He removed his hat, revealing more of that dark hair, and ran a hand through it. "Quincy Owens," he said, extending his other hand. "I am sorry to hear about your trouble, miss." "Eleanor Owens," she said automatically, then realized what she had said. "Oh, we share a surname." "So we do." A slight smile touched his lips, transforming his serious face into something warmer. "No relation, though I am guessing. You sound like you are from back east." "Philadelphia," Eleanor confirmed, accepting his handshake. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip gentle but firm. "I have been traveling for nearly 2 weeks." Quincy replaced his hat and looked down the empty tracks. "The next train to Sweetwater will not run until Thursday. Today is Monday. Do you have funds for a hotel?" Eleanor's silence was answer enough. She had exactly 17 cents in her reticule, and that was meant to last until her wedding. Harold Pettigrew had paid for the train ticket and promised to reimburse her once they were married, but he had not anticipated any delays or mistakes. She felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She had not cried when her mother died 3 years ago, had not cried when her father followed 6 months later, had not cried when she was forced to sell their home to pay his debts and take work as a seamstress in a cramped boarding house. She would not cry now on a train platform in front of a stranger, no matter how kind his eyes were. "I see," Quincy said quietly. He seemed to be thinking, his gaze moving from Eleanor to her trunk and back again. "My ranch is about 5 miles north of here. My sister lives with me since her husband passed last year. You could stay with us until the train runs Thursday. No strings, no payment, just Christian charity." Eleanor stared at him. "You are offering to house a complete stranger for 3 days?" "I am offering to help someone in need," Quincy corrected. "Trinity is a decent town, but a woman alone without funds is vulnerable anywhere. Martha, my sister, will welcome the company. She has been lonely since Thomas died, and another woman around the place might do her good." Everything Eleanor had been taught about propriety and caution warred with the desperate reality of her situation. She studied Quincy's face, looking for any hint of deception or ulterior motive, but found only honest concern. There was something about him that made her want to trust him, a quality she could not quite name but felt in her bones. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked. Quincy's expression grew distant. "2 years ago, my mother was traveling from Austin when her stage broke down between towns. She was stranded for 2 days before someone helped her. She died 6 months later, but she never forgot the kindness of the family who took her in and kept her safe. She always said we should pass that kindness forward when we get the chance." Eleanor felt her resistance crumble. "I would be very grateful for your hospitality, Mr. Owens. I promise I will not be any trouble. Call me Quincy, and I have no doubt you will be nothing but pleasant company." He picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing and gestured toward a wagon parked near the station. "Let us get you out of this heat." The wagon was sturdy and well-maintained, pulled by 2 healthy horses. Quincy secured Eleanor's trunk in the back and helped her up onto the seat with a courtesy that surprised her. Harold's letters had been perfunctory and businesslike, discussing household management and expectations. They had not included any poetry or sentiment, but Eleanor had told herself that practical compatibility was more important than romance. Now, sitting beside Quincy as he guided the horses away from town, she found herself wondering what her life might have been like if she had met someone like him instead. The landscape rolled past in waves of gold and green, the prairie grass rippling in the hot breeze. The sky was impossibly blue and vast, making Eleanor feel very small. She had grown up among brick buildings and cobblestone streets, where the horizon was always interrupted by construction. This openness was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Is it very different from Philadelphia?" Quincy asked, as if reading her thoughts. "Everything is different," Eleanor admitted. "I knew it would be, but knowing and experiencing are not the same thing." "What made you decide to come west?" Eleanor considered her answer carefully. "Necessity primarily. After my parents died, I had no family and few prospects. The work I could get barely paid for a room and food. I wanted something more than just surviving day to day." She paused, then added, "I know that sounds calculating." "It sounds honest," Quincy said. "Most people who come west are running from something or running towards something. Sometimes both. There is no shame in wanting a better life." "What about you? Were you born in Texas?" "Kentucky, originally. My father moved us here when I was 12, looking for land and opportunity. He and my mother built the ranch from nothing. They have both passed now, but Martha and I have kept it going." His hands were steady on the reins, his profile strong against the bright sky. "It is a good life, though it is hard work." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon, the rhythm of hoofbeats, and the whisper of wind through grass. Eleanor found herself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation. There was something calming about Quincy's presence, a quiet strength that made her feel safer than she had in months. The ranch appeared gradually, first as a windmill turning lazily in the distance, then as buildings taking shape against the horizon. The main house was built of wood and stone, larger than Eleanor had expected, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. There were corrals, a barn, and several outbuildings, all showing signs of careful maintenance. Trees had been planted near the house, providing shade that must be precious in this climate. A woman emerged from the house as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 30, with light brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, and the same blue-green eyes as her brother. Her face showed signs of grief and hard work, but her expression brightened when she saw the wagon. "Quincy, you did not tell me you were bringing a guest." There was no censure in her tone, only curiosity. Quincy pulled the horses to a stop and set the brake. "I did not know I would be. Martha, this is Eleanor Owens. She got on the wrong train and ended up in Trinity instead of Sweetwater. I offered her a place to stay until Thursday when the next train runs." Martha came forward, her eyes warm with sympathy. "You poor dear. What a frightening experience. Of course you must stay with us." She extended a hand to help Eleanor down from the wagon. "I am Martha Whitfield. Do not mind my brother's lack of manners in not introducing us properly. He forgets social niceties sometimes." "Thank you so much for your hospitality, Mrs. Whitfield," Eleanor said gratefully. "I promise I will help with whatever work needs doing. I do not want to be a burden." "You are not a burden, and I will be happy for the company. It is just Quincy and me here, and he is not much for conversation." Martha shot her brother an affectionate look as he carried Eleanor's trunk toward the house. "Come inside out of this heat. You must be exhausted from traveling." The interior of the house was cooler and surprisingly spacious. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with sturdy furniture and colorful rugs on the wooden floor. Everything was clean and well kept, showing a woman's touch. Martha led Eleanor down a hallway to a small bedroom with a window overlooking the prairie. "This was my mother's sewing room," Martha explained. "We use it for guests now, though we do not get many. The bed is comfortable, and you should have privacy here." "It is wonderful," Eleanor said sincerely. The room was simple but charming, with a quilt on the bed and curtains framing the window. After sharing cramped quarters in Philadelphia, this felt luxurious. "Why do not you rest a bit and freshen up? Quincy will bring your trunk in. We eat supper around 6, nothing fancy. Just whatever I have managed to cook without burning." Martha's smile was self-deprecating. "I am afraid I am not the best cook, but we manage." After Martha left, Eleanor sank onto the bed, her body finally acknowledging the exhaustion she had been fighting. The mattress was soft, the room quiet except for distant sounds from outside. She allowed herself to close her eyes for just a moment, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning, she had been on a train, rehearsing what she would say to Harold Pettigrew. Now, she was in a stranger's home, miles from where she was supposed to be, with no way to contact Harold until Thursday. He must be frantic with worry, or perhaps angry at her absence. The thought made her anxious, but there was nothing she could do about it now. A knock on the doorframe made her open her eyes. Quincy stood there with her trunk, his hat removed, looking uncertain. "Where would you like this?" "At the foot of the bed would be fine, thank you." Eleanor stood, smoothing her wrinkled traveling dress. "Quincy, I cannot thank you enough for your kindness. I do not know what I would have done if you had not been at that station." "Someone else would have helped," he said, but his expression suggested he was not entirely sure that was true. He set the trunk down carefully. "Trinity is a good town, but it is still rough country. I am glad I was there." "Were you waiting for someone?" Quincy hesitated, then shook his head. "I had business at the general store. I was just leaving when I saw you on the platform looking lost." He met her eyes, and something passed between them, a spark of connection that made Eleanor's breath catch. "I am glad you are here. I am glad you are safe here." "I know what you meant," Eleanor said softly. After Quincy left, Eleanor opened her trunk and retrieved a clean dress. It was wrinkled from being packed, but at least it was not covered in train dust. She found a washstand with a basin and pitcher of water, stripped to her chemise, and cleaned away the grime of travel. The water was cool and refreshing, and she felt more human once she had changed clothes and repinned her hair. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a woman with dark honey blonde hair, hazel eyes, and skin that had gone pale from too many months working indoors. She looked tired, but not defeated, and she lifted her chin with determination. She would get through this temporary setback and continue with her plan. Harold Pettigrew was waiting in Sweetwater with the stable life she needed, but as she left the bedroom and heard Quincy's voice from the front porch, she could not quite banish the flutter in her chest at the sound. Supper was a simple affair of beef stew, fresh bread, and vegetables from Martha's garden. They ate at a large wooden table, and Eleanor found herself relaxing into the easy conversation. Martha was warm and talkative, clearly starved for female company. She asked about Philadelphia's and Eleanor's journey west, listening with genuine interest. "I have never been east of San Antonio," Martha admitted. "Thomas always talked about taking me to New Orleans, but we never managed it. There was always so much work to be done here." "How long were you married?" Eleanor asked gently. 5 years. He died in an accident with a horse, quick and sudden. Some days I am grateful he did not suffer, and other days I am so angry at him for leaving me that I can barely see straight." Martha's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes glistened. "Grief is a strange thing. It comes and goes like the tide." Quincy reached over and squeezed his sister's hand briefly. The gesture was simple, but full of love, and Eleanor felt a pang of longing for that kind of family connection. She had been alone for so long. "Tell us about your intended," Martha said, clearly wanting to change the subject. "What is he like?" Eleanor chose her words carefully. "His name is Harold Pettigrew. He owns a dry goods store in Sweetwater. We have been corresponding for 3 months. He seems like a steady, practical man." "That does not sound very romantic," Martha observed. "Romance is overrated," Eleanor said, then caught Quincy's expression. He looked almost sad. Compatibility and shared goals are more important for a successful marriage than passion. You can have both, Martha said. Thomas and I had both. I would not settle for less if I were you. I am not sure people like me get to choose, Eleanor said quietly. I am not rich or connected. I am grateful Harold was willing to consider me at all. Any man would be lucky to have you, Quincy said suddenly, his voice firm. Do not sell yourself short, Eleanor. The way he said her name, with that slight Texas drawl, made her skin warm. She looked at him across the table, and their eyes met and held. Martha glanced between them with an expression Eleanor could not read. After supper, Martha insisted on cleaning up while Eleanor and Quincy sat on the porch. The sun was setting in a spectacular display of orange and gold, painting the prairie in shades of fire. The heat of the day was finally breaking, replaced by a gentle breeze that carried the scent of grass and earth. It is beautiful here, Eleanor said, sitting in one of the rocking chairs. Harsh, but beautiful. Quincy leaned against the porch railing, his profile silhouetted against the sunset. It gets in your blood. I have been to San Antonio a few times, even to Houston once, but I always feel like I cannot breathe right until I get back to open country. Do you run cattle? Some, mostly horses. I breed and train them, sell to ranchers and the cavalry. It is good work, and I am building a reputation for quality stock. There was pride in his voice, but not arrogance. It is what my father started, and I have expanded it. That must be very fulfilling, continuing his legacy. It is, but it can be lonely too. Martha has helped tremendously, but she has her own grief to work through. I worry about her being isolated out here. She seems strong. She is, but even strong people need support. He turned to look at Eleanor. What will your life be like in Sweetwater? Do you know? Eleanor had thought about this often during her journey. Harold's letters said I would help in the store and manage the household. He has a small house behind the shop, no children from a previous marriage. He is 41, never been married before. He said he had been too busy building his business to look for a wife until now. 41, Quincy repeated. And you are? 22. He frowned slightly. That is quite an age difference. It is not unusual for mail-order bride arrangements, Eleanor said defensively. Older men are more established, better able to provide. That does not mean you should be treated like a business acquisition. What would you have me do? Eleanor asked, more sharply than she intended. Go back to Philadelphia and work myself to death in a garment factory? Become a spinster dependent on charity? I am doing what I must to survive, and I will not apologize for it. Quincy held up his hands. I was not criticizing you. I was criticizing a system that forces women into such limited choices. Eleanor felt her anger deflate. I am sorry. I have been defensive about this for so long. My friends in Philadelphia thought I was crazy to come west to marry a stranger. It is brave, Quincy said. Terrifying, but brave. I respect that you are trying to build a better life for yourself. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The prairie seemed to breathe around them, alive with small sounds. Eleanor felt something unknotting in her chest, some tension she had carried for so long she had forgotten it was there. Can I ask you something? Quincy said eventually. Of course. Are you happy with your decision to marry Harold Pettigrew? Eleanor considered the question honestly. I do not know if happiness is the right word. I am hopeful that we will build a comfortable life together. I am grateful for the opportunity. Beyond that, I suppose I will see. You deserve more than comfortable, Quincy said softly. You deserve to be cherished. Before Eleanor could respond, Martha came out onto the porch. I am turning in. We keep early hours here, Eleanor, since the work starts at dawn. Feel free to stay up as long as you like, but you might want to rest after your journey. Eleanor did feel exhausted now that Martha mentioned it. The events of the day were catching up with her. I think I will go to bed as well. Thank you again for everything. In her room, Eleanor changed into her nightgown and climbed beneath the quilt. Through the window, she could see the stars spread across the sky in impossible numbers, so many more than were visible in Philadelphia. She thought about Quincy's question and her answer, and realized with a start that she had been thinking of her impending marriage to Harold as a solution to a problem, rather than the beginning of a life. When had she stopped imagining happiness as something attainable? When had survival become her only goal? Sleep came eventually, but her dreams were confused and restless, full of trains going to wrong destinations and a blue-green-eyed cowboy who looked at her like she mattered. Eleanor woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and pale dawnlight filtering through the curtains. For a moment, she was disoriented, unsure where she was. Then memory returned along with a flutter of anxiety about Harold and Sweetwater. She dressed quickly in a practical calico dress and ventured out into the main room. Martha was already up, working at the stove. "Good morning. I hope you slept well. Coffee is ready if you would like some." The coffee was strong and bitter, but Eleanor drank it gratefully. "What can I do to help?" "You are a guest. You do not need to work. Please, I would feel better contributing something for my stay." Martha smiled. "Well, if you are offering, I could use help with the washing. We have a creek not far from the house where we do laundry. I was planning to tackle that today." They spent the morning hauling baskets of clothes and linens to the creek, scrubbing them on a washboard and hanging them to dry on lines strung between trees. It was hard, physical work, and Eleanor's hands were red and sore by midday, but there was satisfaction in it. Martha kept up a steady stream of conversation, telling stories about growing up in Kentucky and the early days on the ranch. "Quincy was 14 when we arrived," Martha said, wringing out a shirt. "He took to ranch work like he was born to it. Our father said he had never seen someone with such a natural way with horses. By the time he was 16, other ranchers were asking him to train their difficult animals. He must have been very young when your parents died. Father died 5 years ago, mother 2 years after. Quincy was 23 and I was 26. We were old enough to manage, but it was still hard." Martha paused, her expression thoughtful. "Thomas was a great support during that time. And Quincy, he is the best brother anyone could ask for. When Thomas died, Quincy never made me feel like I was in the way or a burden. He wanted me to stay. Said the ranch was as much mine as his. You are fortunate to have each other." "We are." Martha looked at Eleanor with a searching gaze. "Can I be bold?" "Please. Quincy has not looked at a woman the way he looks at you since Caroline Mason broke his heart 3 years ago." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. "I am engaged to another man, Martha, or as good as. You have not married him yet, and 3 days is enough time to realize if you are making a mistake. I barely know your brother." "Sometimes you just know," Martha said simply. "I knew with Thomas. We met at a barn dance, and by the end of the evening, I knew I would marry him. We were engaged a month later." Eleanor wanted to argue, to insist that her situation was different, but the words stuck in her throat. She had been aware of Quincy every moment since meeting him, attuned to his voice and presence in a way that felt dangerous and thrilling. But she was a practical woman, and practical women did not throw away their security for attraction to a man they had just met. That afternoon, Quincy taught Eleanor how to feed the chickens and collect eggs. He was patient and thorough in his explanations, and Eleanor found herself enjoying the simple tasks. The chickens were amusing in their fussy, important way, and the fresh eggs were beautiful in their basket. "You are a natural," Quincy said, watching her scatter grain. "Have you worked with animals before?" "Never. In Philadelphia, I lived in boarding houses. The closest I came to livestock was the horses pulling delivery wagons." "You have adapted well to ranch life in less than a day." "I think I could adapt to almost anything if I needed to," Eleanor said. "Circumstances have taught me to be flexible." "That is a valuable quality, but you should not always have to adapt to circumstances. Sometimes you get to choose your circumstances." Eleanor straightened, meeting his gaze. "Some people have the luxury of choices. Others do what they must. And which are you?" "I thought I was the latter. Now, I am not so sure." They walked back to the house together, the afternoon sun warm on their shoulders. Quincy's hand brushed against Eleanor's, and the contact sent electricity up her arm. She glanced at him and found him looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Eleanor," he started, then stopped. "Never mind." "What were you going to say?" He shook his head. "It is not my place. You have a life waiting for you in Sweetwater." But I wish you did not." The words came out in a rush. "I know I have no right to say that. We have known each other less than 2 days, but I cannot stop thinking that you showing up on that wrong train was maybe the rightest thing that has happened in a long time." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "Quincy, I cannot. I gave my word to Harold. He paid for my ticket. He is expecting me." "I know. and I respect that you are a woman of your word. But before you get on that train Thursday, I want you to know that there are other options. You could stay here, not as a mail-order bride or an employee, but as someone I would very much like to get to know better. No pressure, no expectations, just a chance to see what might develop between us. You are offering me work. I am offering you a choice, a chance to make a decision based on what you want, not just what you need. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. Why are you being so kind to me? Because you deserve kindness, and because I have not been able to stop thinking about you since I saw you on that platform, looking lost and brave and beautiful. He reached out slowly, giving her time to step back, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I know this is crazy. I know it is too fast. But something about you feels right, Eleanor. Like you belong here. I do not know what to say, she whispered. Say you will think about it. That is all I ask. That evening, Martha made fried chicken and biscuits, and the three of them ate on the porch to catch the breeze. The conversation was light and easy, but Eleanor was intensely aware of Quincy beside her, of every glance and gesture. Martha excused herself early with a knowing look, leaving them alone as twilight deepened. Tell me about Caroline Mason, Eleanor said. It was forward, but she needed to know. Quincy was quiet for a long moment. She was the daughter of a wealthy rancher north of here. I courted her for almost a year. I thought we had an understanding, but when I proposed, she laughed and said she could never marry a horse trainer. She was holding out for a cattle baron or an oil man, someone who could give her the fine things she wanted. I am sorry. That must have been painful. It was at the time. Now I am grateful. She would have been miserable here, and I would have been miserable trying to be someone I am not. He turned to face Eleanor. That is why I know compatibility matters. But I also know you can have compatibility and passion. You should not have to choose. What if I am not capable of passion? Eleanor asked. What if I am too practical, too damaged by loss to feel those kinds of emotions? Do you feel nothing when I am near you? Eleanor's throat was tight. I feel too much. That is the problem. Quincy reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. His thumb traced circles on her palm, and the simple touch was more intimate than anything she had experienced. Feeling too much is not a problem. It is a gift. Do not close yourself off to it because you are afraid. I am terrified, Eleanor admitted, of making the wrong choice, of hurting Harold, of trusting these feelings and having them disappear. I cannot promise feelings never change, but I can promise that what I feel right now is real and strong. And I think you feel it too. Eleanor did not deny it. She sat with Quincy's hand warm in hers, watching the stars emerge, and let herself feel everything she had been trying to suppress. The attraction, yes, but also the sense of rightness Martha had talked about, the feeling of coming home to a place she had never been. I need to meet my obligation to Harold, she said finally. I need to go to Sweetwater and explain the situation in person. He deserves that. I understand. And I will take you there myself Thursday, if that is what you want. What I want, Eleanor said slowly, is to know you better, to see if this feeling between us has any foundation, or if it is just circumstances and loneliness making us imagine things. So stay. After you talk to Harold, if you still want to explore this, come back. If you decide to marry him, I will wish you well, and never interfere, but give yourself the chance to choose. Eleanor squeezed his hand. All right. I will talk to Harold. I will be honest with him. And then I will decide. Wednesday passed in a blur of ranch work and conversation. Eleanor helped Martha with cooking and mending, learning about the rhythms of ranch life. In the afternoon, Quincy took her out to see the horses, and she fell in love with a gentle mare named Daisy. Quincy helped her into the saddle and taught her the basics of riding, walking beside her as she got comfortable with the movement. His hands were steady on her waist when he lifted her down, and he held her a moment longer than necessary, his face close to hers. You are a quick learner, he said softly. I have a good teacher, she replied, and then they were kissing. It was soft and tentative at first, a question more than a demand. Eleanor's hands came up to rest on Quincy's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. When he deepened the kiss, she responded without thinking, losing herself in the warmth and rightness of it. When they finally broke apart, she was breathless and dizzy. Oh, she said inadequately. Yeah, Quincy agreed, his voice rough. That is what I thought too. They stood in the afternoon sun, foreheads touching, and Eleanor felt her carefully constructed plans crumbling like sand. How could she marry Harold when kissing Quincy felt like this? How could she give up security for a feeling, no matter how powerful? I am still going to Sweetwater tomorrow, she said. I have to. I know, and I meant what I said. I will take you there and respect whatever you decide. That night, Eleanor barely slept. She lay in the dark, replaying every moment of the past 3 days, trying to sort her feelings into some kind of order. Harold represented safety, stability, everything she had come west to find. Quincy represented risk and possibility, and a connection that terrified her with its intensity. How was she supposed to choose? Thursday morning arrived with brilliant sunshine and not a cloud in the sky. Eleanor dressed in her best traveling suit, packed her trunk, and tried to ignore the sick feeling in her stomach. Martha hugged her tightly at breakfast. Whatever you decide, you will always have a friend here, Martha said, and a place to stay if you need it. The ride to Sweetwater took most of the morning. Quincy drove the wagon with Eleanor beside him, and they talked about everything and nothing. He told her stories about growing up in Texas, about his dreams of expanding the horse breeding operation, about his hopes for the future. Eleanor shared memories of her parents, her life in Philadelphia, the books she loved to read. It was easy and comfortable, and by the time Sweetwater's buildings appeared on the horizon, Eleanor felt like she had known Quincy her entire life. That must be the general store, Quincy said, pointing to a building on the main street. Pettigrew's Dry Goods was painted across the front in neat letters. Eleanor felt her heart sink. This was real now. She was about to meet the man she had promised to marry. Quincy helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk to the store's entrance. Do you want me to wait? Please, I do not know how long this will take. The bell above the door jangled as Eleanor entered. The store was dim after the bright sunlight outside, smelling of burlap and spices. A thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles looked up from behind the counter. Can I help you? He asked, his voice nasal and impatient. I am looking for Harold Pettigrew. You are looking at him. His eyes narrowed. Who are you? Eleanor Owens. I was supposed to arrive Monday, but I got on the wrong train and ended up in Trinity. I apologize for the delay and any worry I caused. Harold's expression did not soften. If anything, he looked more annoyed. You missed your train? That was careless. I wasted an entire afternoon waiting at the station Monday. Eleanor felt her spine stiffen at his tone. It was an accident, not carelessness. The conductor did not wake me at the right stop. You should have been more vigilant. He came around the counter, looking her up and down critically. Well, you are here now. We can have the wedding tomorrow. I have already made arrangements with the preacher. Actually, I need to speak with you about that. Harold frowned. Speak about what? We have an agreement. I paid for your ticket. You are my bride. I am not a piece of property you purchased, Eleanor said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I am a person, and I need to discuss some concerns with you. Concerns? Harold's face was reddening. What concerns could you possibly have? I am offering you a home and security. You should be grateful. Eleanor thought about Quincy waiting outside, about the kiss in the afternoon sun, about how it felt to be treated with genuine respect and kindness. She looked at Harold Pettigrew, at his cold eyes and irritated expression, and knew with absolute certainty that she could not marry this man. You are right that I should be grateful for the offer, Eleanor said carefully, but I have realized in the past few days that gratitude is not enough foundation for a marriage. I do not think we would make each other happy, Mr. Pettigrew. Happy? He said the word like it was foreign. Marriage is not about happiness. It is about practical partnership. I need someone to keep my house and help in the store. You need someone to provide for you. That is the agreement. I will repay you for the train ticket, Eleanor said. It may take some time, but I give you my word I will pay back every cent. Repay me? Harold's voice rose. You think I care about the money? I told people in town I was getting married. I made arrangements. Now you want to humiliate me by changing your mind? I am sorry for any embarrassment, but I cannot marry you. It would not be right for either of us. Harold's eyes went hard and mean. You have someone else. That is it. Is it not? You came here with another man. I saw him outside with the wagon. I only met him 4 days ago when I was stranded. He was kind enough to help me. Kind enough? Harold sneered. I am sure he was. Well, you can run off with your cowboy if you want, but do not expect sympathy when he tires of you. Men like that do not marry women like you. They use them and move on. Eleanor felt anger flash through her, hot and righteous. You do not know anything about him or about me. I came here prepared to honor my commitment to you, but I will not be spoken to this way. Our arrangement is ended. I will send payment for the ticket as soon as I am able. Good day, Mr. Pettigrew. She turned and walked out of the store with her head high, even though her legs were shaking. Quincy straightened from where he had been leaning against the wagon, his expression concerned. That was quick. Are you all right? I am wonderful, Eleanor said, and realized it was true. Can we go home? Home? To Trinity, to your ranch. If the offer is still open, I would very much like to stay. Quincy's face transformed with joy. He picked Eleanor up and spun her around, right there on Sweetwater's main street, and she laughed for the first time in longer than she could remember. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools. The offer is definitely still open, Quincy said. Are you sure about this? I am sure that I do not want to marry Harold Pettigrew. I am sure that I want to see where these feelings between us might lead. Beyond that, I am taking a leap of faith. Then let us go home, Quincy said, and helped her back into the wagon. The ride back to Trinity felt different from the morning journey, lighter somehow, full of possibility. Eleanor felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had walked away from security, yes, but she had also walked towards something that felt real and true. What did he say when you ended things? Quincy asked. Nothing particularly kind. He was angry about the inconvenience and embarrassment. He suggested you would use me and discard me. Eleanor glanced at Quincy. I told him he did not know what he was talking about. He does not, Quincy said firmly. Eleanor, I want to court you properly. No rushing, no pressure. I want you to have time to be sure of your feelings and your choice. I would like that, Eleanor said softly. Martha was delighted when they returned with Eleanor's trunk. I knew it, she said, hugging Eleanor. I just knew you would come back. Quincy has been impossible these past few days, moping around like a lost calf. I was not moping, Quincy protested. You absolutely were, Martha said cheerfully. But now Eleanor is here, and we can all be happy. Come on, Eleanor, let us get you settled properly this time, and tonight we will have a celebration supper. The weeks that followed were among the happiest of Eleanor's life. She fell into the rhythm of ranch life, learning new skills and discovering strengths she had not known she possessed. Quincy courted her with a combination of respect and romance that made her feel cherished. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, taught her to ride properly, and spent hours talking with her on the porch in the evenings. Martha became not just a friend, but a sister, teaching Eleanor ranch cooking and the practical skills needed for frontier life. They laughed together over burned biscuits and Eleanor's early attempts at milking the cow. The loneliness that had marked Martha's face gradually faded, replaced by genuine happiness. 1 month after Eleanor's arrival, Quincy took her on a picnic to a spot overlooking the prairie where wildflowers bloomed in carpets of color. They sat on a blanket, eating Martha's fried chicken and discussing their dreams for the future. I have been thinking, Quincy said. If you stay, if we build a life together, what would you want it to look like? Eleanor considered. I would want to feel useful. I have been thinking about offering sewing services in Trinity. I am quite skilled with a needle, and the town does not have a seamstress. I could help contribute to the household. You do not need to contribute financially. The ranch does well enough. I know I do not need to, but I want to. I want to have something that is mine, something I build with my own hands. She met his eyes. Is that all right? It is better than all right. I want you to be happy and fulfilled. If sewing makes you happy, then I will support that completely. What about children? Eleanor asked, feeling brave. Do you want them? I do. Someday when we are both ready. What about you? I think I would like that too. I never imagined myself as a mother when I was in Philadelphia. But here, with you, I can imagine it. Quincy took her hand. Eleanor Owens, I love you. I have loved you since that first day on the train platform, and I love you more with each day that passes. I know we have only known each other a month, but I am certain of my feelings. When you are ready, when you are sure, I would be honored if you would marry me. Eleanor felt tears slip down her cheeks. I love you too. I think I have loved you since you offered to help a desperate stranger without asking for anything in return. And I am ready, Quincy. I have never been more sure of anything." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and produced a simple gold band from his pocket. "This was my grandmother's ring. It is not fancy, but it has been in the family for generations." "It is perfect," Eleanor whispered as he slid it onto her finger. They were married 3 weeks later in Trinity's small church. Martha stood as Eleanor's witness, beaming with joy. The town turned out for the celebration, curious about the mail-order bride who had taken the wrong train and ended up staying. Eleanor wore a dress she had sewn herself from beautiful blue fabric Quincy had bought her, and she had never felt more beautiful than when she saw the look in his eyes as she walked down the aisle. The preacher spoke about unexpected blessings and God's mysterious ways, and Eleanor thought about how a missed train stop had led her to exactly where she was meant to be. When Quincy kissed her as her husband, she felt the rightness of it in her bones. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food contributed by neighbors. There was music and dancing, and Eleanor laughed as Quincy spun her around, both of them clumsy but happy. Martha cried happy tears and told anyone who would listen that she had known from the start they were meant for each other. As the sun set and the party wound down, Quincy led Eleanor away from the crowd to the porch where they had spent so many evenings talking. The prairie stretched before them, painted gold by the dying light. "Mrs. Owens," Quincy said, pulling her close. "How does it feel?" "Right," Eleanor said simply. "Everything about this feels right. Even giving up security for a leap of faith. Especially that. I thought I needed security more than anything. But what I really needed was to feel alive, to feel loved. You gave me that." "You gave it to me too," Quincy said. "I was going through the motions before you arrived, working, existing, but not really living. You changed everything." They stood together as stars emerged overhead, the same stars Eleanor had watched from this porch on her first night, when she had been lost and frightened and trying to be brave. Now she was found, and brave, and exactly where she belonged. The first year of their marriage was full of hard work and deeper joy than Eleanor had imagined possible. She established her sewing business in Trinity, working from a small room off the general store 3 days a week. Word spread quickly about her skill, and soon she had more work than she could handle. The money she earned she insisted on using to repay Harold Pettigrew for the train ticket. It took nearly 6 months, but when she finally sent the last payment, she felt the final tie to her old life severed. Quincy's horse breeding operation continued to grow. His reputation for training difficult horses spread throughout Texas, and he often had more work than he could handle. Eleanor loved watching him work with the animals, his patience and skill evident in every interaction. He never used force or cruelty, relying instead on understanding and respect. It was how he approached everything, including their marriage. Martha eventually moved into a small house in Trinity, having met and fallen in love with the town's new doctor, a widower named James Hoffman, who had arrived from Kansas. Their courtship was slow and gentle, both of them healing from past losses, but genuine. Eleanor was honored to stand with Martha at her second wedding, seeing her friend happy again. With Martha settled, Eleanor and Quincy had the ranch house to themselves. They talked late into the nights about their dreams and plans, made love with the passionate tenderness of two people deeply in love, and built a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Quincy consulted Eleanor on major decisions about the ranch, valuing her insight and intelligence. Eleanor felt, for the first time in her life, like an equal partner in building a future. 2 years after their wedding, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. She told Quincy one evening in early spring, watching his face transform with wonder and joy. He was tender and protective throughout her pregnancy, but never coddling or restrictive. When their son was born that November, a healthy boy with his father's eyes and his mother's determination, they named him Thomas James Owens, honoring both Martha's late husband and her new one. Eleanor had worried she would not know how to be a mother, having lost her own so young. But as she held her son for the first time, feeling Quincy's arms around them both, she felt only fierce love and determination to give this child everything she had missed. They would build a family founded on love and respect, where children knew they were valued and cherished. Life settled into a new rhythm with a baby in the house. Eleanor reduced her sewing work to 1 day a week, focusing on her son, but refusing to give up the small piece of independence her business provided. Quincy was a devoted father, often found in the evenings rocking Thomas to sleep while singing old Kentucky songs his mother had taught him. Martha and James had their own child the following year, a daughter named Caroline after James's late wife. The two families spent many Sundays together, sharing meals and watching the children play. Eleanor thought often about how lonely she had been in Philadelphia, how isolated. Now she had a sister in Martha, a best friend in Quincy, and a community in Trinity that had welcomed her completely. 3 years after Thomas's birth, Eleanor had twin daughters, Emma and Alice, who were born during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and made the midwife nervous. But both girls came into the world healthy and howling, and Quincy looked at his wife with such admiration and love that Eleanor felt her heart might burst. 3 children, he said, holding the twins carefully, while Thomas, now a sturdy 3-year-old, peered curiously at his new sisters. Our family keeps growing. Is it too much? Eleanor asked, tired but happy. It is perfect. You are perfect. All of this is more than I ever dreamed of having. The ranch continued to prosper. Quincy hired help to manage the increasing workload, young men from Trinity who wanted to learn the horse trade. Eleanor's sewing business evolved into training other women in the skill, creating a small cooperative that provided income for several families in town. She felt proud of what she had built, of the independence she had maintained, even while being a wife and mother. Thomas grew into a thoughtful, gentle child who adored animals and followed his father everywhere. The twins were opposites, Emma quiet and observant, Alice bold and mischievous. Eleanor watched them all with amazement, unable to quite believe this was her life, that she had found not just survival, but genuine happiness. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Quincy took Eleanor back to the spot where he had proposed, leaving the children with Martha. They sat on a blanket watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire, just as they had years before. Do you ever regret it? Quincy asked. Taking the wrong train? Ending up here instead of following your original plan? Eleanor leaned against his shoulder, solid and warm. Not for a single moment. That wrong train brought me to exactly the right place. I think about it sometimes, Quincy admitted, how easily we might have missed each other. If you had woken at the right stop, if I had left the station 5 minutes earlier, our paths would never have crossed. But they did cross. Maybe there is something to what the preacher said at our wedding about God's mysterious ways. Eleanor smiled. Or maybe it was just luck and timing. Either way, I am grateful. So am I. Quincy pulled her closer. You saved me, Eleanor. I did not realize how much I was just going through the motions until you arrived and reminded me what it felt like to be fully alive. We saved each other, Eleanor corrected. You gave me the courage to choose something beyond mere survival. You showed me I deserved to be loved, not just tolerated. They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to emerge, the same stars that had witnessed the beginning of their love story. Eleanor thought about the girl she had been, desperate and frightened on that Trinity platform. That girl had been brave enough to trust a stranger, to take a risk, to believe in possibility. Eleanor was grateful to her for that courage. The years continued to unfold with the usual mixture of joy and challenge that marked any life. There were hard winters and drought summers, horses that were difficult to train, and children's illnesses that kept Eleanor up nights. But through it all, Eleanor and Quincy faced everything together, their love deepening with each shared struggle and triumph. Thomas grew tall and serious, showing his father's talent with horses. On his 10th birthday, Quincy gave him his own colt to train, and Eleanor watched her son's face transform with joy and responsibility. The twins grew into young ladies, Emma showing interest in Eleanor's sewing business, while Alice declared she wanted to be a horse trainer like her father. Eleanor encouraged both, determined her daughters would have choices she had not. Martha and James had 2 more children, and the extended family grew close. Sunday dinners at the ranch or in Trinity became sacred tradition, with children running wild while adults talked and laughed. Eleanor often paused during these gatherings to simply observe, overwhelmed with gratitude for the community they had built. When Eleanor was 30, she received a letter from Philadelphia. It was from an old friend from the boarding house, bringing news of people Eleanor had known. Most of the news was grim: women working themselves to death, marriages of desperation, lives of quiet struggle. Eleanor felt sad for them, but also grateful for the path she had chosen. She wrote back with news of her own life, hoping it might inspire her friend to take her own risks. Quincy found her on the porch that evening, the letter in her hands. Bad news from Philadelphia? Just a reminder of the life I left behind. Eleanor folded the letter carefully. I could have been one of those women, working in a factory, living in cramped rooms, surviving but not thriving. Instead, you are here, thriving. Quincy sat beside her, taking her hand. Building a life that matters. We are building it together, Eleanor said. That is what makes it matter. As the children grew older and more independent, Eleanor expanded her cooperative, training young women not just in sewing, but in business skills that would allow them to support themselves. She remembered too well the helplessness of having no options, and she was determined to give other women tools for independence. Quincy supported her completely, proud of what she was creating. The ranch continued to prosper, and Quincy began buying land, expanding their holdings. He involved Thomas in every decision, teaching his son not just the practical skills of ranching, but the business acumen needed to run a successful operation. Eleanor watched father and son work together and felt deep satisfaction. They were building something that would last beyond themselves, a legacy for their children. The twins, now 12, were a constant source of delight and exasperation. Emma had a gift for design, creating dress patterns that Eleanor's cooperative used. Alice spent every spare moment in the corrals, and Quincy started teaching her to train horses despite raised eyebrows from some in town. Eleanor and Quincy presented a united front. Their daughter would be allowed to pursue her passion, propriety be damned. On their 10th anniversary, Quincy surprised Eleanor with a week-long trip to San Antonio. It was the first time they had been away from the children for more than a day, and while Eleanor missed them, the time alone with Quincy was precious. They stayed in a fancy hotel, ate in restaurants, and walked the streets hand in hand like newlyweds. "Do you remember when we first met?" Quincy asked one evening as they sat in a restaurant overlooking the San Antonio River. "You looked so lost on that platform." "I was terrified," Eleanor admitted. "My whole life was falling apart, and I was traveling toward an uncertain future with a man I had never met. And then you met me instead." "Best mistake I ever made," Eleanor said, smiling. "Well, best wrong turn. It led me exactly where I needed to go. To me, to you, to us, to the life we built together." Eleanor reached across the table, taking Quincy's hand. "I love you more now than I did when we married. I did not know that was possible, but every year, every experience, every challenge we face together just deepens what I feel." "I know exactly what you mean," Quincy said softly. "You are my partner in every sense of the word, Eleanor. I cannot imagine my life without you." They returned to Trinity refreshed and recommitted to each other and the life they were building. The children had managed well under Martha's supervision, though Alice had apparently tried to train a particularly difficult horse and ended up in a mud puddle. Eleanor hugged her daughter, mud and all, grateful for her spirit and fearlessness. The years continued their steady march. Thomas turned 18 and took on more responsibility at the ranch, becoming his father's true partner. Emma, at 16, was running much of Eleanor's cooperative, showing a head for business that delighted and surprised everyone. Alice, also 16, could train horses as well as men twice her age, and Quincy declared she had even more natural talent than he did. Eleanor and Quincy, now in their late 30s, found new rhythms in their marriage. Their passion had not diminished, but had evolved into something deeper and more nuanced. They knew each other completely, could communicate with glances, moved together through life with the ease of longtime partners. Yet they still surprised each other, still learned new things about each other, still chose each other every day. One evening, sitting on the porch where they had spent countless hours over the years, Eleanor reflected on everything they had built. "Do you remember that first night when I stayed here? How I was so uncertain about everything?" "I remember," Quincy said. "I also remember knowing even then that you were someone special. I tried to tell myself it was just attraction or loneliness, but part of me knew immediately. I fought it so hard," Eleanor admitted. "I was so focused on security and survival that I almost missed out on love. But you did not miss it. You were brave enough to take the risk. We both were." Eleanor leaned her head on Quincy's shoulder. "Thank you for waiting on that platform. Thank you for being the kind of man who helps strangers. Thank you for giving me a choice when I thought I had none." "Thank you for getting on the wrong train," Quincy replied, kissing the top of her head. "Thank you for choosing me over security. Thank you for building this life with me." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the prairie that had become home. Somewhere inside, their children were laughing, and Eleanor could hear the sounds of dishes being washed. This was her life, full, rich, meaningful. A life built on love and respect, risk and reward. Thomas married at 20, bringing home a sweet schoolteacher named Sarah, who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on ranch land, and when their first child was born, a boy they named Quincy after his grandfather, Eleanor held her grandchild and marveled at the continuity of generations. From desperation to abundance, from alone to surrounded by family, her journey had been remarkable. Emma married a young lawyer from Austin, who respected her business acumen and supported her continuing to run the cooperative. They split their time between Austin and Trinity, and Emma's sharp mind for contracts and legal matters helped protect the women in her cooperative from exploitation. Alice shocked Trinity by announcing she had no intention of marrying, at least not anytime soon. She wanted to focus on building her own horse training operation, and she had the skill and drive to do it. Eleanor supported her daughter completely, understanding the value of independence and choice. Quincy and Eleanor became the patriarchs of a growing family, beloved grandparents who were actively involved in their grandchildren's lives. They still ran the ranch together, though with more help now, and Eleanor still worked with her cooperative, training new generations of women in skills and business. On their 20th anniversary, their children threw them a surprise party. The entire town of Trinity seemed to turn out, testament to the respect and affection Eleanor and Quincy had earned over the years. As Eleanor looked around at the crowd of friends and family, she felt overwhelming gratitude. Quincy found her later, sneaking away from the party for a quiet moment. "Happy anniversary, my love." "Happy anniversary," Eleanor replied. 20 years, can you believe it? Feels like both forever and no time at all. Quincy pulled her close, swaying gently to the music drifting from the party. "If I could go back to that day at the station, knowing everything that would come, I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," Eleanor said. "Every struggle, every triumph, every moment has led us here. I would not trade any of it. Even the hard times? Especially the hard times. They taught us we could weather anything together." Eleanor looked up at her husband, seeing silver in his dark hair, lines around his eyes from years of sun and laughter, and felt the same flutter in her chest she had felt at 22. "I love you, Quincy Owens. Thank you for waiting for me." "I would have waited forever," Quincy said, "but I am glad I only had to wait until that train brought you to me." They danced under the stars, surrounded by the community they had helped build, the family they had created, the life they had chosen. Eleanor thought about wrong trains and right reasons, about taking risks and trusting strangers, about how sometimes the biggest mistakes led to the greatest blessings. She had boarded a train bound for security and ended up finding love. She had planned to marry for survival and instead found a partnership that made her thrive. She had thought she knew what she needed, but life and Quincy had taught her to want more, to expect more, to be more. Years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren, watching their children build their own successful lives, seeing the ranch and the cooperative flourish. Eleanor and Quincy grew older together, their love not diminishing, but deepening with each year. They still talked on the porch every evening, still laughed at each other's jokes, still held hands when they walked. When Eleanor was 52, she received word that Harold Pettigrew had died. The news came from Sweetwater's new shopkeeper, who had bought the store from Harold's estate. Eleanor felt sadness for a life, apparently lived without much joy, but also profound gratitude that she had been brave enough to walk away. She could not imagine the woman she would have become as Harold's wife, could not picture a life without Quincy's love and support. "Are you all right?" Quincy asked when she told him. "I am fine, just thinking about how different my life would have been if I had gone through with that marriage." "I try not to think about that," Quincy admitted. "It is too terrible to contemplate." "We were lucky," Eleanor said. "So incredibly lucky. Luck, fate, divine providence, whatever you want to call it. I am just grateful." Their children gave them 14 grandchildren in total, a wild, wonderful bunch that filled the ranch with noise and laughter during family gatherings. Eleanor loved being a grandmother, loved the second chance to influence young lives without the immediate pressure of parenting. She told her grandchildren stories about Philadelphia, about taking the wrong train, about having the courage to choose love over security. Thomas took over full operation of the ranch when Quincy was 60, allowing his father to finally slow down and enjoy retirement. Quincy spent his days training horses for pleasure rather than profit, teaching his grandchildren to ride, and sitting on the porch with Eleanor. They had earned their rest, everyone agreed, but neither of them could be fully idle. Eleanor still consulted with her cooperative, which had become a model for women's businesses throughout Texas. On their 30th anniversary, the family gathered for a massive celebration. 3 generations of Owens filled the ranch, along with friends from Trinity and beyond. Eleanor, now 52, with silver streaking her honey blonde hair, stood with Quincy, now 56, and looked at what they had built. Not just the physical legacy of the ranch and the business, but the family, the love, the community. 30 years, Quincy marveled. 3 decades of marriage, and I still get excited when I see you walk into a room. That is because you are a hopeless romantic, Eleanor teased. I am a hopeful romantic, Quincy corrected, and you made all my hopes come true. Their eldest grandson, young Quincy, now 12, approached with a question. Grandma, is it true you almost married someone else before you met Grandpa? It is true, Eleanor confirmed. I was on my way to marry a man I had never met when I accidentally took the wrong train. That was lucky, the boy said. Very lucky, Eleanor agreed, smiling at Quincy. The luckiest mistake of my life. What made you choose Grandpa instead? The boy asked, with the blunt curiosity of youth. Eleanor considered her answer carefully, wanting to give him truth he could understand. Your grandfather saw me as a person, not just as someone who could be useful to him. He gave me choices when I thought I had none. He loved me for who I was, not what I could do for him, and I loved him for the same reasons. That is what love should be, Quincy added. Partnership, respect, genuine affection. Your grandmother taught me as much as I taught her. The boy nodded seriously, filing this information away, and ran off to join his cousins. Eleanor watched him go with a smile. Do you think our grandchildren understand how rare what we have is? She asked Quincy. They will when they are older and have their own relationships. For now, it is just what they know, and that is a gift. We are showing them what a good marriage looks like. We are showing them what love looks like, Eleanor said. Real love, not the fairy tale kind. The kind that requires work and choice and commitment every single day. And is worth every bit of effort, Quincy said, pulling her close. The party continued around them, full of love and laughter, and Eleanor felt peace settle into her bones. This was what she had been looking for all along, without knowing it. Not security for security's sake, but the security that came from being truly known and loved. Not survival, but a life that thrived and grew and mattered. As the sun set on their anniversary celebration, painting the Texas sky in shades of gold and pink, Eleanor and Quincy stood together on the porch where their love story had unfolded. The prairie stretched before them, unchanged yet ever-changing, constant yet full of possibility. I got on the wrong train, Eleanor said softly. And found me waiting at the right station, Quincy replied. For the right reason, Eleanor finished. Not to meet an obligation or fulfill an arrangement, but because you were exactly where you needed to be at exactly the right time. We both were, Quincy said. 2 people who needed each other, even if we did not know it yet. They stood together, surrounded by family, blessed by community, grateful for every twist of fate that had brought them to this moment. The wrong train had been the right train after all, carrying Eleanor not to the life she had planned, but to the life she was meant to live. She had expected security and found love. She had hoped for survival and found abundance. She had traveled west, looking for a new start, and found a true home. As stars emerged overhead and their grandchildren's laughter echoed in the night, Eleanor leaned against Quincy's solid warmth and knew that every wrong turn, every mistake, every moment of fear and uncertainty had been worth it to end up here, in his arms, living this beautiful life they had built together. She had been a mail-order bride who took the wrong train, and Quincy had been a cowboy waiting for the right reason. Their love story had begun with a mistake and become the greatest truth of their lives. And as they stood together watching the stars emerge over the Texas prairie they both loved, Eleanor knew she would choose this wrong train, this right man, this beautiful life, over and over again for all eternity.